Hello! Tonight we're starting some more seeds. I have some store-bought seed starting mix here. I put it in a big old bin and I pre-moistened it a little bit because it takes a long time for it to soak up water when you have it in the cells, and it's a little bit easier to just work around with your hands with some water. So I did that first, and now I am stuffing it into some cells that I cleaned out the night before with some water and scrubbing and then a squirt of hydrogen peroxide. I'm putting some soil in and just packing it down gently, but packed into the bottom here. And the seeds can go into maybe a dimple that you make, or just right on top and put a little bit more soil on top depending on your seed. Once we get all these packed, we can show you what we do to put some seeds in. I think tonight we might do some flowers and maybe a couple of tomatoes. Got our cells filled with soil. It's been dampened and I added a little bit more water just to get them nice and moist. Right now I've got some flowers in these cells here, and I'm going to plant some more tomato seeds. Generally tomato seeds, I want you to put them a 1/4 inch deep in the soil. You could just sprinkle them on top and put a little bit extra soil on top, maybe pat them down a tad afterwards. I'm just going to dib it down a little bit with a pen, Sharpie, finger, whatever you've got. It'll all be fine. Just a little indentation. Get your seeds. And it might be helpful to generally put in 3 or 4 seeds per cell, just in case you put in one and it doesn't germinate. Then a week later you're wondering, where's my tomato plant? And you've wasted a lot of time. These things are cheap, relatively, and you can always collect more seeds at the end of the season if you really want to. Then cut off any of the weak looking ones that look stringy or too tall, and leave the good ones in the cell for growing to an adult stage. So now that I've got the seeds in there, I'm just kind of patting them down, getting any of the soil from around the edges that got too tall and pushing it down in. I might sprinkle some extra from the bag on top, but as long as they're covered, a 1/4 inch of soil isn't that much. I think they'll be alright. And then I've got little labels here so I don't forget what I planted. This I just cut out of the side of some kind of plastic container. Cut strips, write what it is, and give it a date so that you know when you started, how long it's been in there, the approximate age of the plant. So after you've planted your seeds, you're going to want to make sure they're fairly moist and watered. Let them drain a little bit. Put them into whatever vessel you have to keep the water from getting everywhere. And depending on where you're at, if it's a cool climate and you're starting them in the winter or in the early spring, you're probably going to want a heat mat. You can tuck a heat mat underneath there and let the heat rise up. That'll warm them up to the right soil temperature for germination. And you also want to keep them moist until they germinate. Afterwards you can remove this, but I like to put some kind of cover on top to keep the humidity inside. Just cover it up. And if it's not a super snug fit, you might put a little bit of weight on top just to hold it down. And check it every day. In 2 to maybe 5 days, depending on your seeds. It might take longer. You take this off. Once you see the little green heads poking up, you can remove this, expose them to light, and they'll stop reaching for the light inside a dark chamber. That you don't want them to reach for very long. And then they'll start to green up, and just remember to water them every so often. Alright, so in summary, when you're starting your seeds, dampen the soil, pack your seed cells, put the seeds into the soil, depending on your package instructions, however deep. make sure they're moist enough, label them, put a humidity chamber on top so that the moisture doesn't all escape and the soil dries out before they germinate. You might need a heat mat underneath depending on where you live. Give it a couple of days, check it every once in a while, and once you see sprouts coming up, take the chamber off, make sure they get enough sunlight or artificial light so they can grow, and move forward. Thank you for tuning in.